Buy a track car, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Welcome to Liam's garage, where we've been working on his E36 race car. I don't want to say M3 because it's technically not an M3, but it has an S54, so it kind of lives that M3 life. But when you buy something that's going to be your track car and you spend all this time working on it, doesn't mean it's always going to be track ready. So now let's talk to Liam about what this car is, what we've been doing to it, and why it's not going to the first track day of the season, and instead his M235i is going to go with RE71Rs. This is just how it always goes, man.
The last time that you were here, Tom, we did the suspension and the radiator. When we put the radiator in, the stock oil cooler, which is this little thing right here, was still in the car, and it's way smaller, both in depth and height, than the CSF oil cooler. So on Wednesday night, I spent like 5 hours making brackets, which actually turned out really cool. That I didn't drill any holes. This is on the front bumper crash support with just these, I don't know what kind of metal with holes in it. And then bolted into that hung this below. Then I had this all fabbed up, the oil lines connected, everything was good. But then I realized, I should have thought of this first, that it was like a ½ inch below the brackets for my under panel. So the under panel wouldn't have gone on, and you need that. So then I had to take the radiator out, which is all the work that we did on Sunday. And then I did get this higher somehow so that the oil cooler could be pulled up. And I had this really strange idea of caps for brake cleaner fit perfectly into the cradle. And so I actually used 2 brake cleaner caps.
Where are those?
Right down here. And I JB welded 2 of them together, then put spray foam in them to give them more rigidity. And it worked perfectly, and now the radiator's higher up and the oil cooler works.
You got the oil cooler to stop leaking though?
No.
Oh.
And so I started up to bleed the coolant again, because I had to do that again. And then the oil cooler was leaking, and you can see the leak right from the fitting. Right behind, that's the leak on the ground right there.
Oh, I see.
Some people have a problem with the CSF oil cooler. These O-rings, which are the factory O-rings, I bought 8 of them so I could mess up 4 times. Some people have problems with the diameter of the holes for the fittings for the CSF oil cooler are a tiny bit smaller than the stock holes. So people have problems with getting the O-rings to seat correctly, and I think that's the problem that I'm having.
So tell me about what we did to the suspension. What was in it before, and what did we change?
Before the TC Climbs, we had Bilstein struts with old H&R springs, and it worked. It was just, they were on the older side, they were very rusty, and I wanted height adjustability and damper adjustability, so I picked up these TC Klein single-way adjustable coilovers off Facebook Marketplace for a great deal.
These are so intense looking through the top hat.
Yeah, the top hats are really interesting. You loosen the top hat bolts, and then those little, you can see it on that side, there's a channel that allows it to slide back and forth for camber adjustment. And then these bolts with Allens are for caster. I was really excited to use these, but I'm not going to right now.
So what's going on the track this week if this isn't?
My M235, which is stock other than tires and brake pads. I bought this car with kind of the intentions of keeping my M235i nice and not tracking it. This car, when I bought it, could have been tracked. It was ready to go. And I did one autocross because I bought it in like October, and there was a November autocross, so that's the last thing I did. Over the winter, I've put in just fixing minor things here and there, but the main thing that I put in was an MK60 ABS system. I didn't put it in. Jake from Wild Motorsport put it in for me, but I paid for it. And so that, it was actually out of a ZHP, but it's the same thing in an E46 M3. It's the same thing in most modern cars, have this one ABS unit that's really good and a lot more reliable than the stock E36 ABS, and which wasn't working to begin with. That was one of the major upgrades for safety. The biggest troubles I've had with this car are the oil cooler and radiator, just getting everything to mate correctly and still having the hood close with the radiator up this high. And so me and Eddie the other night, and Andrew, had some creative hammering right there, until we actually realized we could lower it a little bit more. So that didn't do anything.
So isn't that nice though, to have a track car that you don't really feel that guilty about slamming hammers into? Like, that's kind of relieving, isn't it?
It would be nice if I was driving it this weekend. One other problem that I ran into, which isn't a huge deal because it's really common on these, is on the rear trailing arm where the shock bolts into the lower bolt hole. When I was taking that thread out, it didn't take much to break it loose, and it should have because it's the rear shock bolt. And there's some debris on the threads of the bolt, and then I looked in and the threads on the trailing arm were pretty stripped.
So what are we doing today with the M235?
Oh, there's one other problem that I can, come back here. So I was having this mysterious issue where the car was killing batteries, and after sitting for like a day or something like that, like new batteries too, I put a new battery in it, and one day I noticed looking in the rear seat, I could see through this little wiring hole that it was lit up in here. Then I came to the conclusion that this trunk light always stays on, and it would kill a new battery in overnight, so I had no idea what was going on. The other night, I told Eddie and Andrew that when we were working on it, and they took the cover off to take the light out, and they were doing it with a flathead screwdriver, and the screwdriver touched one of the lighting tabs that holds the bulb in, and they saw a little spark, and they thought it was just the bulb. They were getting another connection, so the bulb burnt out, but then the bulb still looked okay. After we did the radiator, I was gonna bleed the coolant again. I go to put the fuel pump switch on, and there's nothing. The fuel pump usually makes a lot of noise because there's no sound insulation, so I can usually hear it. Nothing. So then checked with a multimeter to see if the switch was getting power, and it wasn't. So we knew it was something having to do with wiring to the switch and not a fuel pump issue or something like that. Then I go under the hood to look at the fuses, and there was a 10 amp fuse for the courtesy lights. So like the dome lights, the trunk lights, the lights in the door, that was blown. And that was the only fuse that was blown. All the fuel pump fuses were fine. Since it was the only blown fuse, I was like, let's replace that. And I go to flip the switch, and the fuel pump went on. My fuel pump is wired into the hot for my courtesy lights. So,
I'm trying to stay silent back here, but that's still funny to me.
So instead of taking the E36 to the track day, which as it always happens, the track day comes up faster than you can possibly fix your car. Luckily, Liam has the M235i, so he literally went down to Tire Rack, picked up a set of RE71Rs in person, got them mounted yesterday, and now we're gonna bleed the brakes. Not a full flush, just a bleed to make sure it's ready to go.
And then this one comes out.
Pump. Open. Pump. Hold. Open. Pump. We're ending today's vlog in a boat. Someone's boat. I feel like we're in a washing machine right now. Everything's just crushing and crushing, and it's like those aren't words. That's how tired we are. But anyway, the M235 is now ready for the track day. The E36 is not. So that's kind of the conclusion to the track day special situation. Like, it's gonna be more work than you expect it to be. It's gonna end up costing more money than you think it's gonna be. Yeah. And half the time, you're probably gonna take your daily driver on the track anyway because your track car is broken. Thank you guys so much for watching. This week, I'm actually gonna be traveling out to Michigan to hang out with Chris Amos, the Topher of the Topher and Winding Road magazine. We've got a big event over in Wisconsin for the Midwest Automotive Media Association, so we're gonna be driving a ton of press cars, and that'll be coming up on my channel and Winding Road magazine pretty soon. But more importantly, there's gonna be great vlogs with me and Chris. I'm actually gonna be in his wedding. I'm meeting his fiance for the first time tomorrow. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You know the best way to support me is to watch, like, and comment on my videos, and if you wanna go above and beyond, click that Patreon link. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive. The meow meow.